Some different options for digital textbooks, articles, current events, and even some things for data gathering. Here's what we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about tech tools that cost money. Okay, so all this stuff we're going to talk about is free. We're not going to talk about any apps or sites that do not work anymore. So if you ever come across on Twitter or in a blog and you see that icon for the good old app LeafSnap, which has not worked in probably about 5 years. There's a new one now with a different icon. It's not the same thing. All right. Also, anything that is flash-based. Okay, so we know as teachers, we always try to cling to, you might still have one of those videos that you only have it as a VCR tape and you want to show it, and you keep that VCR that you have, you know, kind of off to the side just so you can play that. Well, we've got some sites out there that it's like, oh, this site's great, it uses flash. We are one-to-one iPads in our district, so some of our teachers go down then to the computer lab to be able to use it. By next year, you know, flash is going to be completely gone. It's not going to work anyway, so now we're just going to have to tear that Band-Aid off. Instead, what we're going to look for is anything that has that orange shield on it telling us that it's HTML5, which just basically means it'll work. And it'll be able to work for us whether it's on a computer, on a Chromebook, on an iPad. I'm also not going to bombard you here. I'm not going to give you any video sites. You got tons of other sites, so, oh, these videos here, there's there. We're not going to talk about those. Other part we will not talk about, tech tools that stink. Right? I went through this list that you have on there, and there were some other ones that, you know, I could have just piled onto there, but some of them, quite frankly, once you got into them, it didn't do a whole lot. I mean, if all it was going to be just a simple like flashcard thing or matching about the different particles of the element, who cares? We can just make that Quizlet anyway. But if it's something where it's allowing me to interact with the particles and see how the electrical relations are going on, that's a whole different story. Okay? So here's what you're going to want to do. So I've got on that page, and we'll go back to it again here in a moment, where I've got a Google spreadsheet of all the different tech tools that I'm going to be showing you. Probably the best way for you to enjoy this presentation is to follow along on that sheet and then to watch what I'm showing you up here with those different spots so that you can be pretty excited about some different stuff that you can use. So I'm just going to switch to them. I'll bring that back up there, but when you scan that code or go to that web page, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see the conference presentation slides. Don't even go to those because I'm going to show it to you up here anyway. What you're going to want to do is go here to the spreadsheet listing of tools. Here's what we've got. The tools I have listed in order that I'm going to talk about them. So I'm starting up there with CK12, going all the way down. I tell you what the resource is, the topic, the grades, the link to get to it, whether it is something that is a website, an app, and then what type of resource is it, a game, is it a simulation, all that kind of thing. Now you'll notice on that spreadsheet, when you get down to like number 45, there's a little gray bar there. The gray bar, everything underneath there, that was stuff that I presented last year at P&C. I'm not repeating, okay? So there are good things that I'm not going to talk about that are down further on that spreadsheet that you'll want to check out, take a look at. Also, if you are here to help out other folks, like you're not a science teacher, but you're getting the resources for them, I put up there on top of the spreadsheet, please just share it with whoever, okay? I'm, very happy that you go ahead and share that out. So I'm going to go ahead back to this, so that way if some of you need to be able to get to that spot to where you can see the spreadsheet. And while that is going on, I just want to take a little informal poll with folks raising their hands. How many of you in here are science teachers? Okay. How many of you work with elementary, middle school, and I'm going to say middle school like 5 to 8, just to be broad with it, okay, and 9 to 12. Okay, good. And now devices. How many of you, when you are working with your students, whether you're one-to-one or not, just when you do stuff with your students, primarily they are going to do stuff for you with technology on computers? How many are Chromebooks? How many are iPads? Okay. How many of you allow your students to use their phone? Okay, good. And I just wanted to know that in case, like when I said iPads, if nobody raised their hand at all, there are a couple apps I was going to show that are iOS only. If we didn't have anybody raise their hand, I would just skip. Okay. Does anybody still need this? All right. So first one we're going to talk about, CK12. Anybody here using CK12 already? Okay, good. So with CK12, what you basically get is kind of a mix-up of where you have these open source, they call it a digital textbook, but it's really so much more than that. Because what they've got are there's textbook articles, manipulatives, and little like simulations that go along with each topic. Now I did talk about this last year, but what's different is they came up with a Flexbook 2.0. What CK12 always had, they had the Flexbook, but then they also had these things called Plix, which were like manipulatives. And then they had lab simulations, and they were like all separate animals. Okay, you had to search for one thing here and one thing there. The Flexbook 2.0, everything is combined together. So when I go into and look at the Flexbooks for science, I'll see in here that I've got earth science for middle school, life science, there's physical science, and then it goes from between middle school and high school there. But what I can get when I go to a certain article, and this is one with Newton's laws of motion, I'm actually going to go to the real deal, so we're going to switch out of that presentation. So here's my section on connecting Newton's first and second laws. I'm getting that just with a link, so I could go and post that link into Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas, whatever I want. Go down, there's the reading, embedded videos that they have that goes over the concept, and then if I go a little bit farther down, here's one of these manipulatives. So if I just go ahead right there to launch, that's going to go ahead and load this up, open it up, and it gives me this part of where I can go and change some certain factors to interpret some things. Okay, and in there it's giving me some information about in terms of velocity, that type of thing. I go a little bit further down, they have one here that's about the elevator. So I launch that, opens up, and it's always giving me these different things where I can go ahead and change some variables and see what happens, which is what we want students to do in science. Okay? And here with this one, if I'm not quite sure, I can click on a gear, and I go to info, it gives me some little information about it. When I go to run this, so let's say I go ahead, I'm going to do medium acceleration. We get that set to go. We're going to go up to the second floor. Elevator changes for me and moves up. And then I get my real-time graphs up there to get my data. If I need maybe a little bit more guidance for my students, up there in the top where it says worksheet, I can click on that and I can get a worksheet that I can make available to the students that will give me a little bit more explanation about what that simulation is doing. Okay? So a lot of good stuff that's right in there within CK12. Right? Now the other part to this, which is nice, is that along with that, actually I'll stay right here with my account, you can go and create your own Flexbooks collections. So here if I go into my own profile and I go into my library, what's it this says to? Okay. I can go in and pick up Flexbooks that I have already created, and this is going to move a little slow, so I'm just going to go ahead back on here and show a screenshot. So here I had a Flexbook that said Pete and C mashup. So I had everything from like the middle school life science Flexbook, but then I also threw in something from the Earth and Space middle school science book, and I put that chapter in there because a lot of you, if you work with middle school science, you're not just teaching physics or chem or bio, it's you've got to do a little bit of everything because of the tests, right? So then you can do it this way. Oh, well, you know what? We're doing intro, we're doing cell biology, and then I'm doing solar system, or maybe I got to do solar system before cell bio because the other teachers has the microscopes right now, and I've got to kind of go in that little stall pattern until I get the microscopes. Boom. So okay, let's do our solar system stuff. You put it right into there so that you have it organized. And even though I have it organized like that as a teacher, and you create that account for yourself for free, and if you're a Google school, you can just log in with Google, I can just organize that for myself. The students may not ever see that actual book because all I'm going to do is go to each chapter and then post the link for that in Schoology. We're a Schoology school, so we would just put stuff into there. And I have one science teacher still uses Google Classroom, they put the stuff into there. So it gives a lot of that flexibility of what you can do with it. Okay. There's another one of the simulations with a rocket one, which is pretty good. And some of those manipulatives, the one they have with light and with, it actually makes you try to move those targets around so that you're getting it hit by the laser. Pretty good. Okay. Now, if you're high school, OpenStax, this is what you can use for AP level. All right. So we actually did this year. Now, for AP, you only have two choices. You have AP Bio and AP Physics, and that is it. But when you go and use OpenStax, and I'll bring this up right here, we decided to use this for our AP Biology class because our bio textbook was out of date, and when they were going to do the new, basically you had to make sure you were up to code with everything. We went with this one for OpenStax. So here I go into the AP Bio book. It has all the chapters that follow right along with the AP course. In fact, when you go to the College Board site and they list recommended texts, this is one of them. They actually list this one out on there. So it's like, oh, can we really do this? Yeah, you can. So I go into proteins, go into the protein stuff, and it will be it's an AP biology textbook, which, you know, as exciting as that can be at times. Okay? If you have to have a printed version, you can get a printed version of this. Right? That was something we had to do. So up here there's a link that says buy book. So you go and click on that, you go right to Amazon, you get each one that is printed out. And you know, we found our AP Bio one, it must be way down here. There it is, the AP Bio one, hardcover 60, we ordered ours for 50. Because we had to have a class set for the students just in case they wanted to take them home. That class set is doing a wonderful job holding up the one side wall in the room because they never leave. Nobody's taking it. Okay? I mean, it is thick. It is a big book. And the other thing it's missing, it does not have the requisite picture of an owl or woody-stemmed plant on the cover like we would have on every single other AP Bio book. This one does, it's just that plain part right there. My son goes to Pitt, and their physics that they had, he's in chemical engineering, but their physics book was that one right there that they use. Which he had the option to buy the bound, he did not. It just went digital. Okay. Google Science Journal.
Our physical world is full of wonder. It's a
How many of you have used Google Science Journal before? Anyone? Okay. Well, I'm going to switch from that to my iPad. And so with Google Science Journal, what we can do with Google Science Journal is it allows us to basically use any type of sensors that are on our iPad or on a smartphone. So it works with an Android phone, iPhone, doesn't matter. So here I've got an experiment that I made. I'm going to call it Conference Sound. I'm going to open it up. I'm actually going to delete that out because that was from my colleague in the car. Okay. So what I have to set up is an observation. So over here on the side, on the right-hand side, where I've got these little icons there, the one with the squiggle line, I can select a bunch of different sensors. So I can decide to do acceleration. I can do some things with the barometer. I can do light intensity. You can see that changes as I cover it up, open it up there. So here what I want to do, we won't do pitch, I want to do sound. So let's do a quick little experiment here. I'm going to try to get as close to the middle as possible. I want to see which side of the room can be a little bit louder. So on the count of 3, we're going to first have this side. I just want you to yell out science. I'm going to get a recording for how loud you are, and then we'll do the same thing with this side over here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the record button. You'll see how that changes there. So this side of the room only, going to yell science. 1, 2, 3.
Science!
Stop that one. There's my measurement right there. And what you can see right away already, minimum of 21.9, maximum 50.6. So our highest level there was 56.0 decibels. All right, this side. We're going to do the same thing. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Science!
And looks like we've got a maximum there of 59 decibels. And if I want to, I can go into my little dots up in there. I can view details, And now I get my data. If I go and drag along this timeline, I can go ahead and find an exact point. I have the value showing there, 58.99. And if I want to, I can go ahead and add a note to the timeline right there. And I can say that that was the group to yell. And if I want to, I can go ahead to my camera. I'll take a picture. Everybody say cheese. Add in. I save it. And now that's in there in my experiment. And then if your Google administrator for your district has it allowed, these can be saved directly into their Google Drive. If it's not switched on, they just use it as a guest and it's saved onto the device. Okay? But a lot of really cool different things that you can do here, along with the magnetism one, so the magnetometer. Something that I was doing before was I was just going ahead and I'm getting a reading right there of like around 47, 46. I put my smartphone on and bring it close to where the sensor is at, and I can see that magnetometer going up because of the electromagnetism there with the electricity in my phone. If I'm not quite sure of what that sensor is actually doing, there's a little letter I there. I just tap on that. Oh, what's going on? And there's a nice little explanation about how that how that sensor is actually working and what it does. Okay. The one that will be a little bit different depending on the device, the light sensor. So the light sensor, I have a unit called EV. It's because I have an iPad. If you have an iPad or iPhone, it'll be an EV. If you have an Android device, it'll actually be Lux. And it will explain that difference to you about how things are being measured. But what's nice is it's even giving you a little bit of that whole inverse square law with the light intensity stuff with that explanation. So really good stuff that's in there with Google Science Journal. If you're going to do the motion stuff, like anything with the accelerometer and all that kind of thing, it's best that they use a phone. That way they just put it in their pocket. If you want them to jump or be on a swing, anything like that, then it's a little bit more secure than using the iPad itself. Now Google does a nice job of backing up like resources of where you can go to get ideas for this. So when you go to their actual site, they've got a spot where you can search, and you can search by level. And by level, they tell you like, okay, the student's older, younger. Do you want this to be a one-time deal or something that takes a lot of time? And what's the amount of equipment you want to use? Is it that they're just using the sensor? Is it that they're using the sensor and maybe some common materials like a meter stick, that type of thing? Or is it equipment like you're going to actually have to have some lab stuff that goes along with it? So they've got a nice database of things to check out with that. The getting started stuff really gets you right into it as to what you can do with it. Okay. Augmented reality. How many of you use Google Expeditions with students? Anybody? Okay. So the AR stuff, really, really cool. There I've got the one where it was with the types of cells, and I had it on the desk in my classroom right next to the bottle of 7-Up and everything else. So that works out real nice. Kind of fun to see that. But what's also nice with it is how you can have students use that app to maybe go and use it for some other things. So I'm going to go to this one for the skeletal system. I'm going to view it in AR. I'll move my iPad around to get, and we'll tap right there. And then there's that skeleton. And you guys don't see it, but it is right there. No matter where I go walking around, I can do that. I can tap up to get some information that's up there on the side. One thing that we've had some people do is where if students are working with a partner, that they'll go ahead and bring up that AR device. Will make them a little bit smaller. And Kristen, do you want to stand up right there? And I can have Kristen stand next to it, and I can say, hey, go ahead and point at the sternum. Point at the sternum. There you go. So I can go ahead and then just take a screenshot of that. We can then put that into Google Slideshow, anything like that, to show what we know. Or we take Google Slide. We can just take a screenshot and use some of the annotation tools to draw stuff right on there. Okay. So what's nice with that when you're doing the Google Expedition stuff what I always suggest when you go into this discover area, you do have some filters. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll say, well, if I want AR stuff, if I want the augmented reality, I'll tap on where it says AR so I only get that type of stuff. When you search for things, less is more. So if you want cell organelles, just try cell or just try the word biology to see what you get, because sometimes it can be really tricky. The other thing I look for is the providers. So like my skeletal systems, Vita Systems is the one that made it. Types of cells, Vita Systems again, because I liked the quality of the stuff that they've made, so you look for those things that are on there. This is also not like other things where anybody can just make one and put it up there. So these are vetted. There is a thing Google has where you can make your own tours, but they don't have this other stuff. The other one I want to talk about was this WWF Free Rivers, and that's not the World Wrestling Federation, the World Wildlife Federation. And what this one does is it puts through, it lets you see how, when we go and manage rivers, how that can affect some different things. So
they're home to tens of thousands of species, provide food and livelihoods for millions of people, and sustain energy landscapes. But we are losing the world's few remaining free-flowing rivers to human development. At WWF, we believe people can live in harmony with nature.
So this puts
this is the story of free-flowing rivers.
Up here for me. I'll say that's good, ready to go. Okay, yep, I know. I have to be close to it. So I go up here. When I start on the rain,
ocean water evaporates
it gets
into
ocean
clouds,
water,
then fall as rain.
My clouds start
As rainwater
coming in.
flows over the landscape, it collects important nutrients and other natural materials, known as sediment.
Now I have to
The
go
enriched
down
water
here to the delta
a
area
river's
to
flow
see that
naturally
sediment.
changes,
I'm gonna
depositing
skip real quick
sediment
to build
along
the
the
dam.
way.
This
When
part's pretty
full,
cool here, so when
people
I build
need
this
energy.
dam,
But the wrong dam in the wrong place
there's
can
the dam
devastate
comes up,
people
and then you'll
and
start
nature.
to see
See
some
how
of the
this
land
dam
along the
impacts the island
sides
community,
dry up,
farmers,
so
and
it's
delta.
not getting as much of the water anymore. So it's pretty cool. It is a kind of a one-time thing. There's not too much else that's in there. The other part that you can do is you go to this other thing called the map experience, which sometimes is, people don't see that when they're using the app. And what this one will do is it actually gets into a little bit more of the different organisms that are affected by things. So sometimes it's a little tricky with, doesn't like the carpet. There we go. Okay. So there I've got, and what this will do is it'll show me here that, okay, in different areas where I've got, I want that smaller. It'll show me these different organisms that are affected by those dams and how they're being set up. So pretty interesting, pretty good stuff. The last one to talk about with AR stuff, JigSpace. Now JigSpace, this one is iOS only. This one again is an augmented reality, but what it kind of does is it's almost like a kind of step through. It reminds me of those like How Things Work books, those old like eyewitness books things. So here if I go into like the induction motor, I say go, it's gonna retrieve, it's basically downloading everything that I need for the motor. And come on. Getting there. But what this will do is it'll kind of give us this expanded diagram. So there's my motor. I go through several different steps where it'll have different information for me that shows up down there at the bottom. And I can just kind of tap with my finger and spin it around, or I can move around for each one. But you'll see it keeps bringing out different parts of those components to explain what's going on in there. Okay. Now they're kind of limited to what you're really going to have is stuff with like machines. They do have a science category where you'll see some stuff, but definitely with like plate tectonics. So if you're doing earth and space science, you're going to find a good bit of stuff in there. And even just this how-to stuff, there are some in there that you would be able to apply in a science classroom. So it's pretty neat. That's a fairly new tool that's out there, JigSpace. but it is definitely one worth taking a look at if you are an iOS school. All right, now for our computer folks and iPads, either one, Nova Labs. Okay, Nova Labs with this one right here. What you're basically doing is you've got different simulations, tutorials that you're going through and doing. So I'm going to go ahead to the site itself. They've got the list of the labs over here on the side. Out of all of them, now they have that the Polar Lab one is listed first. That one doesn't seem to work real well, I'll be honest with you. But the ones that I've noticed that work very well that we've used, this Evolution one. And when you get into that lab, you've got some different things. First, you get into where, besides the link to just go and play the game, video quizzes, meet the experts. So they've got videos that are actually from scientists working with this stuff, and then the video library from Nova. Okay, yeah, this is gonna be good stuff. When you get into the game, before you even just go and click on the game, and you're like, well, what can I do with this? They got an educator guide. So you can just click on the educator guide and kind of glance over it and look to see, is this even going to be something I want to do? So instead of you having to go through and like whittle through it for 10, 15 minutes, you can go to that educator guide and find out. You know, there's a lesson summary, what is it that we're doing, what grade levels are appropriate for, the standards, support, do you want them to have a worksheet when they're doing it, boom, it's right there. So it really helps out with all that, and each of those has that. But when I go on this Evolution one, I'm going to go ahead and click play game, and wait for it to load. But when it does that, so here I was working with creating some different phylogenetic trees, so I'm going to go ahead and click play. I'm going to start with the earliest one that I did. So here I've got to drag my gecko lizard and my palm tree up here. The trait that they share is that they have cells with nuclei. I bring that right here on that part of the tree. It pops through, feeds it through, says yes, it's good. Now when I go to the next part, photosynthetic autotroph or heterotrophic. If I don't know those things, like most of your students may not, if they click on the magnifying glass, then they can go in and find more information about those organisms. So that way they are not just going around and just clicking on different colored circles. They will do that on that first level, but as it keeps going, it gets more and more that they're just clicking around randomly. You're gonna know it, and you'll be like, hey, click on the magnifying glass. You gotta look at this. You gotta see what you're trying to do. Okay. So that again with the Nova one, that's the Evolution one, which is pretty good. This other one I wanted to show with this energy one, I already got, because with Tucson, all I had to do was set up solar energy, and I was good, ready to go. Okay, I didn't have to, that wasn't too much thought. But all right, now if I go to Los Angeles and I go to accept this challenge, this says a challenge level of 4. So I go in there and I accept that one. This is going to be tougher. It gives me an energy profile, gives me an idea of the area. Then when I go to design my system, I have to decide how much area am I going to dedicate to each type of power source. And do I want to invest in, like with solar, do I want to invest in the efficiency? With wind, how large are those turbines going to be? And you can see that as I'm making changes there, I've got a budget. So I can't just say, well, let's just crank up geothermal to the max. Well, that I could. Wow, okay, so Ellie's got a good budget. All right. But then, you know, any of these other ones, I try to boost up the solar, I'm way over budget. So now I've got to try, okay, bring it down. I test my system, it'll run, and it just keeps giving me these warnings because I am way under. If I look at where it says local potential underneath, so instead of just doing stuff randomly, now this is showing me maps. What's the potential for solar energy in California? Here's my key, where's that going to work? That's where we're at there. Okay, looks like solar is a good choice for that. We definitely want to invest in solar. What about geothermal? What's that look like for there? Not too bad. Wind speed, I'm down in that dark green. It's low. We don't build any turbines. We don't need any windmills down there. We got to invest in that other stuff. So, you know, it's a really good way of them working with interpreting the data, going back and forth. And then once they get one of those accomplished, then moving on to the other ones. Because like I said, it does start them off first with like, you'll see Tucson says challenge level 1. So it's the easiest. But LA, and then I tried Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oh my gosh, the Tennessee one's tough because there's nothing that screams out as like, hey, this one's gonna be real good for you. Everything's kind of like in the middle. And then it's, as you're running and you're generating electricity, you're going along fine, then winter hits. And you're not getting as much, and yeah, a lot that they can learn with that real good stuff in there, okay? And again, there are some other ones that are there in the Nova Labs. Like I said, the polar one I wasn't impressed with. The cybersecurity one's decent, the RNA one's pretty good, and the sun one as well, and you can explore those based on, you know, what it is that you're into. Okay, pass all those. HHMI Bio Interactive, okay? This one, now they've redesigned their site where you can just go and search for things on their site, which is real nice. And when you go to search for those items, it gives you some different types that you can have on there. So let's say I decide that I want to look at something like, I'll just say bacteria, and I do a search. This is going to give me, so right there I've got 36 different results. So this origins of antibiotic resistance. It's got something here called data points. Okay, what that means is I go into this, it's giving me something where students look at a graph, look at data, and have some questions to interpret it. So here it comes up, it's showing me everything there. I go to this educator materials, which is basically code for, hey, here's the teacher guide to it. It's showing me, it's actually telling me what to do. It says, hey, project this for students, and then ask them some discussion questions here, okay? And then it will give them, down here it gives me background info of what the research was, how to interpret the graph, and then what you can have the students discuss with those discussion questions. So even if you're using this just at the start of class as like a bell ringer, getting them prepped up before Keystone time for interpreting data, lots of good stuff in there. The other things that you'll find in the HHMI stuff, they do have some things that are interactives. Okay, so you will see some stuff in there. Sometimes it's also like here it says clips, so it's going to be some different video clips that they have available. I'm going to switch over to my iPad because they just run a little bit faster, but these apps that HHMI have will also work on a computer. They have a spot where you can launch it. So one of them, the biome viewer, with this one, I go ahead and I select a biome, so I'm going to go up here into the boreal forest in Canada. Besides seeing the climatogram and everything else, if I want to, what's nice is that I can go into more information, go to wildlife, and get specific species of wildlife that are in that area. And it is not generic. So for example, here I'm seeing the American mink and the American pygmy shrew. If I go over to Asia, go the same area, same biome, and I go into wildlife, I'm not going to see the American shrew, okay, which is good, so it shouldn't be there, and it gives you a whole lot more that's on there. So it's a pretty nice tool, you know, and it's something that even the younger students will be able to do a lot with that. There's a similar one then called Earth Viewer, and this one now is going in through the geologic timeline of planet Earth, and you can go ahead and scroll down things to see how Earth changes through the eras. You can also add different layers to it, so you can say, hey, I want to know when there were different extinction events, and now those yellow dots on my timeline are the different extinction events that happen. So there's the Cretaceous extinction. I can tap on it, it gives me the information, and then I can go ahead and look at what the globe actually looked like, what we think it looked like during that time. CRISPR's going into some stuff with your genetic modification. I think this would be something you would only use with AP Bio students. I kind of played around with it a little bit, and I'll be honest, I didn't know what it was doing, okay? But it goes through, and it allows you to kind of, as you scroll, you get to see what's actually happening there with the DNA, with the explanation as it's going through. You know, I backtrack here and it says explore. I can go into that and it gives me a little bit more information about what's happening during that process, which is pretty neat, but was definitely pretty high level. And then they have another one, Bacterial ID Lab. And again, this can work on iPad or you can run it from the browser. I'll go ahead and resume. So I was doing my sample prep here. So I have to tap my micropipette because I already swabbed a little bit. And I've got to go and get my digestive buffer. It's in there. Now I got to bring it over to the centrifuge. Put it in, and then show me what I'm doing with my sample preparation. Basically, it's going to have them run through, collect data for these different samples, and then make some conclusions at the end. Okay, this is going to be for your higher kids. So this is going to be for like your AP Bio or something like that. But pretty interesting, pretty cool, because you just may not have that equipment to be able to do all that. The pack, I'm going to skip that one in the amount of time. Playground physics. Anybody with physics or general science stuff, you definitely want to check this out if your school has iPads. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Chris. You definitely want to check that out if your school has iPads. Unfortunately, it is one that is iPad only. But what this one allows you to do, basically you record video within the app. And then after you record that video, you tap on different spots of that motion that's going on. And then you're able to see some real-time information about things like the velocity, the potential, the kinetic energy. So there's all the data points that they made. There's some graphs down there of that data that's going on. There they're pushing, you can see some stuff. We can see the acceleration going on back and forth. So it gives them those tools to be able to do that. It's something that can be a little bit tough to try to like figure out, well, what do I do with this app, but they've got an educator guide. So that link is on that spreadsheet for you. You download that educator guide. They have a how-to section about the app, and then they've got lessons. So like with this lesson, tells me it's middle school 6 to 8, tells me what to do, how to have them do it. It even gives them some stuff to do, like this question here. This is before they're even using the app. It's asking them to look at an example and interpret it based on the info here, and now it's okay. Use the data that you gathered and answer those same questions. So pretty cool. A lot of, it's like a 120-page educator guide, big table of contents. It's like its own little book itself, so pretty cool. Science by Simulation, that website, you can go in. There's two different ones to look at there. Environmental simulations and a climate, the climate sim one and a food emissions one. The climate sim one's interesting because you can set factors like, what if we pass these things called the Paris Conventions to try to control carbon emissions? What's going to happen over time? What happens if we don't make any changes at all? What are we going to see happen with global temperature over time? So it's pretty interesting. It's pretty hardcore, but again, you know, your students would be able to get a lot from that. The food emissions one, that one would be fine for younger students. What it does is you pick the food, and it actually tells you, okay, well, when we produce the food, what's the carbon footprint just by producing that type of food, and what's the carbon footprint from shipping that type of food? So that's something that even like our 7th, 8th graders, maybe even your 6th graders would be able to do that. They're focused on that one part. The Learn Genetics webpage, a lot of good stuff on there as well. I listed for you everything that is pretty much HTML5. They are still converting, so not everything is, but some stuff that is in there, the pigeon breeding stuff, and this pigeon breeding one, there's also an app that goes along with it. And either way, you do it through the app or through the website. Basically, it's asking you to go ahead and breed pigeons that have different types of characteristics. So kind of like what we used to do with like, there was like a genetic cat one that was out there. So now they did pigeons instead. And kind of the same idea, and that's taken forever and a day. So I am just going to go ahead and skip on past that one. But there is some pretty good stuff that's in there for you with that Learn Genetics. Okay. Pterogenesis. This, I just want to show this little, this is an extremely polished game. show you because it was a cool little trailer because it even had President Reagan giving his speech after the Challenger disaster. But what Teragenesis will do, this is like a way that you can combine kind of everything. Biological sciences, earth and space, physics. So what I've got to do, I'll go ahead and collect those credits. Yep. Okay. So I am in the middle of trying to colonize Mars. And my job is to terraform Mars so that we can live on there. So I've got a couple different things I have to do. I have to set up research. I have to set up, yeah, we'll donate that. So here if I go into research, I've got to decide, well, do I want to research stuff that would lead to maybe heating up the planet or cooling it down? Do I want to do something with pressure? Do I want to do something with trying to do anything with oxygen, with trapping oxygen on there? So I make a selection, I go ahead and hit research, and it'll just go ahead and try to do some things. If I need to, I go back into where I have some of my population set up. So I'm going to go back to Senja City, that's a population of 255 people. I go in there, I'm going to examine it. Here's what I've got so far, cooling plant, different HAB units. So I decide, well, I need to build something else. Let's start trying to change the pressure here on Mars. So I'm going to invest in that thermal dust. It tells me what it does, how it does it, and I go ahead and build it. If I have no idea what I want to try to do for things, then what I need to do is actually look at some things like stats to see where I need to get these different characteristics where they need to be. Okay? So this is very much like if any of you have ever played like the Sid Meier's Civilization game on the computer or anything like that. This is just like that, except it is based on science. Now there are things that will pop up where we'll ask students possibly for in-app purchases. So here, this incoming transmission, they try to code it. We've detected a transmission on a ship from Mars. Do you want to view the message or just ignore it? The message is just a video advertisement for something. I could just decline it. I don't have to do it at all, and then just continue on through there. But then the other thing that's nice is that when the students aren't actually on the game, things keep happening. So while I have that investment going on trying to build the cooling plant and everything else, it'll still try to go ahead and make this. So here I'm gonna, yeah, so I don't have enough credits, so I'm gonna have to wait on that because I took a lot of time on that. But it asked me to do stuff with my population, with culture. And what's interesting with it is that once they colonize Mars, you get done with Mars, you go to Jupiter, you go to Saturn, all that different type of stuff. What we've had our teachers do with this one, they don't use it in class directly. They put it out there. They had students that would then go and use it. Our students are able to take their iPads home with them. So some were playing it on their iPads, some were doing it on their own phone, their own device. And a couple of those students would then give updates with the teacher of what they were doing, how far along they were, and what kind of changes they were making and why. So again, it was pretty neat to see that happening. Okay. We're gonna finish up with a couple other apps here, and I'm hoping that out of a couple of these that are running. Okay, that one doesn't like. So the fishery one is crashing over there. So here's another similar one to Teragenesis. This one is called Cells, Evolution to Singularity. And this one can be played just on the website as well. So this is something that's an idle clicker. So if I go ahead and just tap, I start getting these little entropy items. I use that to go and purchase things in this tree. And when I purchase things in that tree, you can see it's giving me the explanation if you have anybody that is with real young students, the Tammy's Tower one is a good one, but we didn't have anyone in here that was with that. But it basically has them build a block tower to have this animal go up and grab a banana off a tree, but it's set up very elementary way, and then like the wind can come and knock down the tower. So it's pretty cool. It's from Smithsonian. It does a nice job. This Skin and Bones one is something that they have at the National Museum of Natural History, but you can do a lot with it outside of being in there as well. So if I go ahead into the vampire bat, there are some things I can do with AR that I can have printed out there, but if I just go into the activity, what it's going to have me do is I have to listen to these bat sounds. And then I have to try to guess what the mystery one is. I think it was the little brown mitosis. Right. Moves on, gives me another one. And now it's asking me, like, okay, when the bat's trying to do its echolocation stuff, I think that sounded like stone. A little tough when you're trying to tell different bats in between. So it's nice in that it has those different little interactive parts there with that activity for the different animals, and each one has a different part to it. Okay, so that's that Smithsonian Skin and Bones, pretty good one. Voyager, this used to be a Google app as well as iOS, but it's not anymore. But what I do with this one, so right now I've got to go ahead and try to get circling around the moon. So I'm just going to tap on Earth, I drag down, I launch. The Voyager probe will go by. I can see how much it scans past. It said I was successful. But then the cool part is that I get that little video of the flyby of where I went to. Now once you get done with the moon, then you've got to go eventually to Mars, Jupiter, and then you're getting to where things are much more complicated. Because as I go to get to Jupiter there, I've got to check, well, where's the moon at? Where's Mars at on the way? Can I get there all the way? Do I have to slingshot? All that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty interesting, the kids really get involved with it, but what's cool then is those flyby things. It's a stock video. They all get the same exact flyby footage that happens. But it's still pretty interesting for it to happen. Here I think I got too close to Jupiter. Boom. Voyager probe is gone. Okay. So I'd have to go back to the drawing board on that one. I just want to close some of these because that's slowing things down a little bit for me. Some other ones, the Smithsonian's got equation, disaster. I'm not going to go into those because we're running out of time here, but I do want to show you Socratic. How many of you have heard of this one? Have heard of Socratic? Okay. So what Socratic will do, this is basically almost like your photo math for science. Okay. So if you're not aware that it's out there, it's out there. Okay. And so what it can do, I'm going to go into my personal account. So I've got up here on my computer basically like a homework assignment. I go ahead and hold my app there. I take a picture. How long will it take that 1500 watt motor lift 300 kilogram piano? I tap go, analyzes, searches through, gives me the answers. Okay. Gives me an explanation to it. I can also get more info there from the web about things. Okay. So it's important to know just that it's out there. Okay, so even if you don't have your students like say, hey, this app is available, I mean, some of them are going to know that it is there. For you as a teacher, what is helpful with this app, I will do that later, I'll write it down. If I swipe up, I get to where there's some different topics that are available. And you can only do this from a mobile device. You can't do it from the computer. Online through just a regular browser, Google bought Socratic, so all you're going to find is the outdated one from 3 years ago. You're not going to see the new stuff. But if I go into here to, let's say, my chemistry stuff, and I'm like, oh, all right, well, I want to take a look at some stuff about compounds. And what you're going to find as a teacher is, a lot of times for every single thing, they've got a nice little kind of infographic that's there that breaks things down. Related videos. When you scroll across there, you might find a video on YouTube that's from a provider that you didn't know about. Like, everybody knows about Crash Course, but maybe you're going to see something different that you hadn't used before that would be something useful to you. And then also, too, even just under the resources. Now, these are just Wikipedia, Britannica, and Chemical, but some of the other ones, depending on your topic, you might find an interesting resource down there in that area. That'll be something for you to check out and even use with your students. So that's where I've seen like kind of the biggest use for that Socratic is just for the teachers themselves going through some of those to kind of see what's available, what's out there. Okay. Nova Elements. That app was one of our favorites for years, and then iOS 11 came out and it died. Nova Elements is back. So if you used to use Nova Elements, it is available again. And what's nice with Nova Elements, when you go into here to this area where it says like play, you've got spots where you try to build different molecules. So let's say I want to go ahead and build adenine. So when I want to go and build the molecule of adenine, I need to have all of my atoms already built. So I didn't build phosphorus yet. It takes me over to there where I can go ahead and build phosphorus by adding my protons, neutrons, and electrons. Or I can auto-build it. It makes it good to go. Now I go back into my adenine molecule, and I need to go through and put my atoms where they're at. Okay? And it also gives me a nice little explanation about what adenine even is as you go through. And here I'm going through all the different, several different amino acids that they can build. It also goes into some things like some different sugars, vitamins, that type of thing. A lot of our Gen Sci Science 1 with the atomic structure, and then with some biological molecules, we use the Nova Element stuff. And then besides that part, even just having where you can explore the periodic table is pretty good on there. Now, if all you're looking for is a periodic table one, this one is from the Royal Academy out of London, and what I like with this one is specifically that if you're doing anything with elements and you want students to know like what's it used for and this and that, I go into beryllium, I'm getting into the uses and properties, I'm getting into some things as like the history of it. So if any of you are using some of the periodic table sites out there, it just condensed it all into that app. But it does a nice job with it, as the pictures right there. That was something I used to do with my 8th and 9th graders with some different periodic element things on there. Okay. Chirality 2, if you're in organic chemistry, and that's going to crash on me right now as I got so many open, but chirality 2, looking at functional groups and putting them into those molecules and everything else. Okay. So again, everything else, we are running out of time there, so I'm going to go ahead and stop, and I'll bring back up again that last slide so that you can get to, if you didn't, the copy of the spreadsheet. Okay, because again, there's a lot more tools on there than what we talked about, but please feel free to reach out to me and let me know if you had any success with stuff that worked for you, and appreciate you coming by and being here with me. If you have any questions, I'll hang out a little bit before heading to lunch like everybody else. All right. Thank you very much.